Hey everyone, it's Bradford, your carnivore curmudgeon. If you're new to my channel, I am an actual carnivore, but I am not an actual curmudgeon mostly. I would say I'm an all-around delight. Everyone says that. Well, not everyone, but my mother says it. But today I got something special for you. I have a plate of divine swine, something straight out of hog heaven. I have a dish of pig that you can dig. We're gonna go and we're going to uncork some delicious pork. So let's get cooking. Okay, so first up is this slab of pork belly that I've had in my freezer for many months. And so I thawed it out, and now it's time to just season it up and get it ready to put in the oven so that we have a pork belly element to our divine swine dish. Pretty simple on this seasoning. All I did was coat it not too heavily, but generously with some Redmond salt, and then just a little sprinkling of some black pepper all around, and don't forget the edges. I do have an entire video of pork belly with brown butter that you might want to check out. It seems to be a popular video. Putting it on a rack on a sheet tray, and then I'm going to put it into the oven. I did use the convect feature. It comes in handy sometimes, but 425 degrees, and I started it off at 25 minutes because in this particular case, I do not want this especially crispy. I want an in-between soft and crispy texture. And while it's cooking, I have this pork loin. That's the next element of this dish. I got it at Food Lion. It was a little over a pound for $4. Wasn't on sale. Usually I can find them on sale. But this is exactly the right kind of size for what I wanted for this dish. Not very big around. Sometimes the pork loins at the grocery store can be just huge pork loins, and I wanted a sort of a petite one. So not much to do to this one after unpackaging. It really didn't need much in the way of cleaning it up. Very little fat and silver skin is on this. I'm not even going to bother with. It's going to cook off just fine while it's in the oven. Now the next part for you hardcore carnivores can be eliminated, but I'm going to take this stone ground mustard and season this up. Mustard and pork just go together so well, and I've tried this a couple of times, and just putting a nice slather of stone ground mustard, or the mustard of your choice, on this pork loin and letting it sit for a while really makes a great flavor. Now don't be shy. Get right in there with that bottle of mustard and squeeze it hard, squeeze it until it farts like your weird Uncle Billy at the family reunion, and slather it up real nice. Doesn't have to be completely encased in mustard, but don't be shy either. And that's just going to sit for a while. We're going to add a little Redmond salt. You don't have to do that either, but there's not really much salt in mustard, so a little salt seasoning will probably go a long way. And that's just going to sit while our pork belly continues to and finishes cooking. All in all, I ended up cooking the pork belly for about 40 minutes before I got it to the place I liked it. I pulled it out and made some bacon. That's right, you can't have too much pork in this dish. So we're going to add also some bacon. Now you don't need this many strips. 2 strips is enough for what I'm doing here, but I was doing some meal prep for the week. I checked that pork loin to make sure that it was between 160 and 170 degrees. The pork in the United States is tested for trichinosis, so you don't really have to worry about that too much. But in this case, that was really the sort of softness and crustiness I was looking for. I set that aside so that it could rest, and then in the interest of keeping my dirty dishes to a minimum, I used the same baking sheet and baking rack and put my pork loin on there. This doesn't take a long time to cook, so that pork loin will be fine, even if I need to reheat it in a pan, but it'll be fine while it sits and rests. It'll still be warm by the time this pork loin is done. Now, I have this internal probe temperature device called Temp Spike that connects by Bluetooth to my phone. And so I thought this might come in handy, even though it's small. It's a small piece of meat. I don't have to keep running out and checking it and temping it. But what I'm looking for on here is an internal temperature of about 145 degrees Fahrenheit. And by looking at my phone, I can tell what the current temperature internal is of the meat and the ambient temperature, which tells me a lot about how absolutely shitty my Electrolux oven is, just in case you're shopping for ovens. So on the POS Electrolux oven, I've switched it from convect to regular bake. I put it on 335 because I know it always cooks a whole lot colder. And then I put the pork loin into the oven and just monitored on my temp spike. But of course, you can check it periodically with your own thermometer in order to keep your eye on it and not let it get overcooked. As I mentioned before, American pork is tested for trichinosis, so cooking it to a medium rare is perfectly acceptable. And so my goal was to get this to 145 degrees. And in fact, the temp spike, I'm sure for liability reasons, would not allow me to set it for 145 degrees for pork. So I just put it on a lamb setting because I was allowed to set it for a goal temperature of 145 under lamb. So when temp spike screeched at me and told me that it was done, I pulled it from the oven to let it sit and rest for just a little bit while I went on to one of the final steps of this plate. The pork belly is still nice and warm, but it is cooled enough to the touch. And so here's where it's really your choice. You can cut it in big, thick strips. You can cut it in thin strips. You can cut it into cubes. I'm going to do a little bit of both. But this pork belly is going to sit next to our pork loin, which is so very lean. And the pork belly is going to really provide a nice complementary fatty component to the pork loin. And as far as our bacon goes, those two strips, we're just going to chop them up until they become essentially bacon dust. Want this real fine, just want this to be a hint, not the star of the show, since we have the delicious pork belly and that really tender, awesome pork loin already going. Now, unnecessary, but still a very complimentary aspect to this, I did cook up what I intended to be a couple of very runny, soft-boiled eggs. I did overcook them by a couple of minutes and ended up with some jammy eggs, which are still delicious, but this goes really great with this pork. Speaking of which, we're getting right down to the nitty-gritty. Going to take that pork loin that's been resting for about 10 to 15 minutes and just slice it into nice 1 or 2 bite size pork medallions. So here's one of the end pieces, and yes, it has that weird probe hole in it, and any other time I would tell you to beware of all probe holes, but in this particular case, it's nothing to squeal about. Look at that. It's perfect. It's meaty, it's tender, it's juicy, it's buttery. You barely need a knife to even cut through this little medallion, and it's going to go perfectly, that lean medallion with this really tasty, fatty pork belly. Now, you can take your slab of pork belly or you can take your cubes of pork belly and just load up that plate to the degree that you wish to have both, and you are in for a treat. Especially, or as they say in my neck of the woods, especially if you wish to add that egg. I really think it would have been better with a nice runny, soft-boiled egg, but you know, egg is an egg is an egg. I'm good with it. Now, final touch, a little bit of sprinkles. Remember how you used to sprinkle those little sprinkles on your grandma's Christmas cookies. Well, in this case, some bacon sprinkles. And there you have a nice carnivore pork medallion, pork belly, and egg plate of delightful food. And there's one extra step if you choose. Now, there's something about pork and mustard, as I mentioned earlier, that goes so well together. And just to sort of ramp it up just a little bit, you could take about 2/3 of a cup of chicken stock, which goes great with pork, and add to it, after you've reduced that chicken stock down by about half, add about a half a cup of sour cream. Take that sour cream and warm it up gently. You really don't want to boil this. You don't want it to break and be weird looking. And keep constantly stirring until you have a nice homogenized pan of sour cream and chicken stock, and add a tab of butter. This doesn't take very long, just a couple of minutes. You're just really warming it through. But then you get to a certain point where the reduction is starting to show bubbles on the edges right there. That's the time when you turn the heat down and take some Dijon mustard, about 1/4 of a cup, and squoze it in there. And then take, if you used the other kind of mustard like I did, the ground, coarse ground mustard, and about 2 tablespoons of that. And you want to do this at the end. If you do it too soon, that mustard and the oil in the mustard is going to break and make it kind of a weird consistency. So just add it at the very end, just so that you can incorporate it and make it into a nice little sauce. This is not a gravy. I did go ahead and add some salt, even though there's some salt in the chicken stock. And when it was all said and done, this makes a very nice little sauce topping, or a dipping sauce if you prefer, but it goes great with this dish. So, plate number 2, another egg, pork medallions with a weird probe hole, and a slab, in this case, of the pork belly. And I could have, done fancy chef hands, but it's all going in my face hole. So put it all together, sprinkle it with bacon, and you end up with the same dish, but with just a nice little tangy mustard sauce. And it does complement it very well. So that's all I got for you this time, and I hope you give it a try, and I hope you'll let me know how it goes. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Get out there and eat some meat, and hope to see you next time.